Monzo Business is the proud partner of The Rest is Money. Now, did you know that over 600,000 businesses are already banking with Monzo Business? And mine is one of them. To celebrate us teaming up, we've got a special offer for you. New customers get Monzo Business Pro or Team for free for the first 6 months. Just head to monzo.com/therestismoney to claim it for your business. Now, maybe you run your own company and you're looking for a bank with the solutions to make your financial admin easier, like expense cards that help your team save loads of time as your business grows. Just go to monzo.com/therestismoney to learn more about the special offer and find out which of their plans is right for you. Offer is available to new Monzo Business customers only for either Pro or Team plan. Offer ends on the 31st of July 2025. After the offer period ends, Pro will be £9 a month and Team from £25 a month. Expense cards are only available with Team. Only sole traders or limited company directors in the UK can apply. T's and C's apply.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Money with me, Robert Peston.
And me, Steph McGovern. And also with us today, backed by popular demand, Karen Ward, Chief Market Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Karen, thank you for coming back to have a chat with us.
Absolute pleasure. Different topic today. I'm excited about talking about this one.
Yeah, and it is an issue that's matters to everybody, and certainly is one that's on our minds. You've done some research about British people's attitudes towards retirement and in particular saving for retirement, which, many of us would say, JP Morgan got its fingers in lots of pies, but it felt like a bit of a departure. What motivated you to do this and what did you learn?
Yeah, great question. As if I'm not busy enough, Robert, with all that is going on in the world. I just decided to embark on this little sort of side hustle passion project. The way it came about was partly, there are times in your life where what you're doing professionally kind of collides with something that's just going on in your broader life. And the last few months has been one of those. So, in my professional work, something interesting is happening in the UK, showing up in the UK data. And that is that we're saving a bit more in the UK. We traditionally have been a nation a little bit like the US, a bit sort of live for the moment, spend as much as we can. And we haven't traditionally been a particularly high saving nation.
In fact, I saw some data on this yesterday, and it's only the UK that spends as much of its income as America does.
Traditionally.
Yeah.
But that's what's changed post-pandemic. So our savings rate is running at 12%. We are saving suddenly more than Germany. Germany traditionally have been the very high saving nation. So we're suddenly saving a bit more. Now, where the economic story starts to unravel is you would think that if households are saving more, that provides money, capital to businesses. And what you'd hope to see, therefore, is that as households are saving a bit more, that money starts to get channeled into businesses and they invest more. And then all sorts of good things happen, like productivity, and the economy grows, even though households aren't spending as much. But that's where the story sort of falls apart, in that we aren't seeing that pickup in business investment. We aren't seeing the productivity, the growth on the back of it.
Was your initial instinct the government's got to do more to persuade people to, if we want to get the economy growing faster, we've been bumping along the bottom. Did you originally think, actually, the thing to do is just to get us back to our old bad habits of spending more?
That I think certainly is tempting for governments to think about. Let's try and get people spending that cash just to get that short-term growth kick. But as I say, there was this sort of private aspect of my life that also motivated me with this whole project, in that, I'm reaching that stage of my life where various family members around me are reaching age where they suddenly need a little bit more support and a bit more care. And the realities of going into that stage of your life, seeing the cost of it, seeing, how pension pots and wealth aren't living up to what you'd hope to pay for it. And then the challenges that creates for the entire family structure really hit home. So basically I'm sat there looking at the data, and then I'm going home and dealing with all these challenges. So this was what motivated me. And I thought, I need to understand what's going on in these savings. How are people saving? Where are they putting the money? Are they equipping themselves to have the kind of retirement, the kind of late stage life that members of my family are not looking at? So that was the motivation. So what we did, and, thanks to JP Morgan Asset Management, my company, who sort of gave me the resources to go off and do this, we did a survey of the UK population just to delve into that question of, you seem to be saving more. Where are you saving? What are your expectations of the future? How is this motivating some of the behaviour? And that's where the findings of the report are pretty startling. I would say a little alarming, but certainly then motivates me coming back to my day job. If there's some pretty easy things to fix in order for us to get to that situation where they're retiring and they're having a much more comfortable outcome.
So before we get into where they're putting the money, did you get a sense of why they're saving more? Because it was interesting during the pandemic, because obviously we weren't able necessarily to spend as much, that people did have a bit more disposable income. Not everyone, but some people did. And I think there was definitely, anecdotally from what people were saying to me, a sense of like, oh, now this really is, we don't know what might happen in the future. We better save a bit. And is it connected to that? And has that kind of carried on because people have realised they can afford to save, even though they possibly think they couldn't?
I think that's right. The pot that was accumulated when we were all stuck at home and couldn't spend is still very much there. Households haven't drawn that down. So they obviously feel a bit more comfortable with that sort of safety nest that they've provided themselves. And as you say, that then prompts a bit of a better habit for thinking, oh, well, I've already got that account opened. I've got that money there. Maybe incrementally I can just pop a little bit more in each month. So I think it has shifted us into a better savings habit. But the problems come as we start to look about how they're doing it.
Can I ask you one other question before we get on to what your very, very interesting survey shows? And we should just go through it point by point, because it does yield some surprising findings about British people are doing and their attitudes. There's a big difference between America and Britain on this point. Both countries, we saw a surge in savings during the pandemic. America has burnt through all of that. Why has America burned through it? What's the difference between America and Britain in your view? Why have we kept the savings habit and they've just gone back to their spending ways?
I think it's confidence. I think we had a bigger inflation shock. It was more long lasting. And that was basically more terrifying. I mean, I don't know about you, but watching my energy bill quadruple was utterly terrifying. And I think that lasted, that fear of, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay my way given this very uncertain shocks to cost of living? I think that lasted here much longer than it did in the US. In the US, they weren't as rocked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine in terms of their energy market. So their inflation fell back much more quickly. So I think it was that sense of being back in control of their finances, less fearful about employment and inflation, that made them think, oh, great, things are back to normal and I can therefore spend that money.
So talk us through, as I say, what your survey discovered.
Okay, so three key things, certainly in terms of how people are behaving and how they're deploying these savings and some of the assumptions they're making along the way. So the first and most startling is when we think about where this money is going as it's being saved, there's a massive over-reliance on cash. People are putting that money in their local bank deposit. And don't get me wrong, that there's having your emergency cushion in something that's easy access is absolutely the right thing to do. And for many people, again, as I'm talking about this report, also very mindful that I'm probably speaking to a small proportion of the population who can actually save significantly beyond their, day-to-day bills. But even those individuals, when we look at them, there's still an awful lot of that excess money beyond the emergency pot sitting in cash. And I think what's so concerning about that is, when we ask them, why? What do you think, if you're wanting to provide for your retirement, what do you think is going to be the best asset? Where's the best place to park your money? more people said cash than said stocks and shares. And the evidence to the past sits completely. It's not like we've been through a 20-year equity market crash that sort of therefore is giving people rise to these feelings of stocks are too risky. We've been through, a period of stocks performing very well. In fact, even just since the pandemic, to give you some numbers on this, if that savings, so we've got an additional 890 billion, to put some numbers on this savings, if that savings had been put in a global basket of stocks, it would now be, each pound would now be worth £1.39. In cash, even accounting for the fact that little bit of interest you've probably got, it's now worth 91p in terms of what it can buy, the real value of it. So that's, I think, the really startling aspect. We're super addicted to cash.
Because of inflation, people have lost money by holding cash, whereas they would have made a decent gain holding stocks and shares. And people just aren't aware of that.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting because I've been thinking loads about this because I am totally obsessed with, investing and working out, where you can make the most money and how. And I have been for a long time. And what I've found is I think we don't understand risk properly. So my partner's dad was talking to me about where should he put his money. He's got a bit of money from his pension and he was like, I'm not sure where to put it. And I was explaining to him about my stocks and shares account. And so, but he was like, oh, but I might lose it, Steph, I might lose it. And I went, no, in the long term, the probability is that you will earn way more money on it than you would by just having it in cash savings. And he went, yes, but you just don't get the certainty, do you? And so I had this really long conversation with him. I convinced him to get stocks and shares ISA. He did it. And then there was a bit of a wobble on the stock market and he took all his money out and lost money. And I feel like there's a real sense of not understanding what the risk really is, because you always hear on the adverts for investment products that aren't cash ones, there is a chance your money may go down as well as up. And I think that instantly puts people off, because inflation is a really hard thing to understand, because you just see the value of your cash go up, but you don't see in real terms it being eaten away at. So for me, it feels like we need more education around what risk really is. And with more evidence, like you're saying, of the difference between having it in a cash savings versus stocks and shares over a certain length of time. But people just fear it.
There's so many things that you've just said about your experience with your partner's dad that come through in this survey. People are saying it's the fear of loss is very clear. But you're right. It's that, really what we're saying with stocks and shares is you don't put your emergency cash in the stock market. If you're needing to buy a car next year, if you're needing to, have some money in case you're out of work for a period, no, of course, you don't put that in the stock market. But what we're talking here is about people preparing themselves for their life they're going to have in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100s. My nan is 102, as I say. Big prompt of this report.
What's her secret?
Love her. I don't know, but gosh, I hope I've got her genes.
Yeah.
Bingo seems to be her secret.
Brilliant. That's gambling in another.
But you're absolutely right. The fear, and I think that is the education piece of getting people to understand. Having your mindset, it might go down 10%. And then having your mindset, it might then go up 20%, and therefore pop your money in and don't look at it. I mean, I think the new technology actually is going to prove very unhelpful for how people manage their money, because we're going to have easy access to tracking it and then making bad decisions, because the gut can work terribly against you when you're thinking about long-term decisions. So, of course, stocks and shares go up. I mean, look at the S&P this year, the US stock market. It fell 20%. It's now up 26%. That's within the last 5 months. So, absolutely, it's a bumpier ride. But over the long term, we have seen cash does not hold its value, because at the end of the day, it's all about what you can buy in 30, 40 years' time. But the stock market does. Your average returns are in the stock market over a really long period of time, depending on where you are, but something in the region of high single digits versus 0 on cash. So getting people really comfortable with the fact it's going to be a bit bumpy. Be prepared for that. That's fine. That's normal. That's the way these markets work. But stick with it.
It was very clear from your research and I didn't think this was new at all, actually. This has been a phenomenon that we've all observed our entire lives, that young people basically think retirement never comes. And therefore, if you're young, almost nobody thinks I've got to put money into a pension. And as I say, give us the figures on that in a minute. But one of the things that's changed across my lifetime is, when I entered the workforce, because we lived in a much more paternalistic society, and because everybody knew that, if young people have got a choice between going out and have a good time with some money or putting it away for when they're 60 or 65, they're going to choose to spend it on having a good time. When you got your first job, there was a pension fund provided by the employer. It was a final salary pension scheme. And I think you could opt out, but it was very hard to opt out. It was basically taken for granted that some of your money and the employer's money would go into this pension pot. Now, we do have now compulsory pension savings, but at really low levels of saving. We have gone backwards, haven't we, in terms of trying to correct this normal sort of psychological instinct of young people that they're never going to be old, so why should they save?
Absolutely. I mean, to give you the numbers on that, so a quarter of the younger cohort that we surveyed had no plans to think about it.
Just to drill down on that, is that saving for retirement or saving? Because what you are also seeing is there are some young people who are now investing and looking at investing for not retirement, but just because they think that's where they might potentially make more money. So like medium term rather than long term.
Not a lot of that, sadly, coming through in the survey, Steph. I mean, there was, even though when you look at the drilling down into those holding in cash, the younger cohort, when you were asking them about cash, I sort of expected the result to be, well, I'm saving for my house deposit, or I'm saving for more immediate, planning a family, etc. And actually the answer that sort of startled me was retirement's a long time away. Whereas time is the sharpest tool in an investor's armory. Just to give you the numbers on that, if you started popping some money into stocks when you're 25, you'd have to put into that pocket £34,000 less than if you started at 55 in order to get to 100 grand. So you've got to put so much less in because of how it compounds. You pay your £100 in, and then you get your little bit of interest on that, and then the next year you get your interest on top of the 105, let's say. So the young aren't using that. The other aspect that comes out, particularly about the younger cohort from the survey, a few worrying things. One is expectations on if they can get a house, how that's going to prepare them for their retirement. So we already know, relative to the US, our wealth, half of our wealth is in property assets.
So what is the proportion in the States?
In the States, it's more like 20%.
Right. So this British obsession that your pension is your house is really quite extreme.
And if I I asked particularly that younger cohort who, it's not really surprising. They've probably watched their parents' home quadruple, if not, even higher in value. And when I said to them, house prices have risen over 200% in the last 25 years, what do you think will happen will it be less, more, the same? 71% of that younger cohort said that it's going to be more than the increases we've seen in the past. And that just can't happen because at the end of the day, houses are only worth what people can pay for them. And we've had some sort of extraordinary factors in the last 20 years of no additional supply. The government's now correcting that with its housing plan, massive deregulation of the banks, which allowed people to borrow more for a given income. That's, of course, being pulled back. So we had house prices decouple from earnings temporarily, but that just can't happen. So again, the whole lens that I'm doing this survey is how people have a vision of how they want their life to be in retirement. Are the things they're doing today going to live up to their expectations? And massive over-reliance on cash is a problem. Massive over-reliance on what their property is going to serve them as a pension.
If they can get a property.
if they can even get a property. And then the other aspect of the young cohort, which I think maybe speaks to some of the people you might have interacted with, Steph, is those that are interested in investing, this younger cohort, where they're turning to for advice is finfluencers. So
yes, I knew you were going to say
social
that.
media. And that, I think, of course, takes us into the risk of what advice they're getting. Are they going to be pushed into assets which maybe don't have the characteristics that are going to serve them? I mean, I'm very much thinking about cryptocurrencies and some of the volatility there. And so kind of getting even those that are thinking about not just saving but investing, are they getting quality advice, and are they then deploying their money in suitable long-term vehicles?
That is so true, because that, again, is what I've been talking to quite a few young people about, is that influencers who are giving these kind of sound bites on what to do with your money on TikTok. And you, like you say, a lot of this is kind of high-risk, volatile stuff and not comparable really to stocks and shares. But can I just ask you on drilling down on that point about compound interest? Because I think you're right. Again, when it comes to people deciding what to do with their money, they don't necessarily understand that, you know, your stocks and shares is likely to beat inflation compared to cash savings. And they definitely quite often don't understand compound interest, because it's the same with, you know, debt as well, not understanding compound interest when you're getting credit cards and things like that. There's a real education point here. Like that example you just gave of, if you start saving when you're 25 and you're going to have to put in 34 grand less than someone who starts later on, that's really tangible. That's like, wow, 34 grand, that's shed loads of money to someone. But it's never explained like that, is it? So...
No, exactly. And, you know, there's this whole debate about whether Einstein did say that compound interest was the new wonder of the world. But it's parking your money, and just in simple terms, it's just as that money, you know, if say you've put it in the stock market and the company has paid you a dividend of, say, you know, in the UK at the moment, the FTSE is paying you 5% dividend. So you get 5%. So your £100 has become 105. Even if you don't add in anything more, then the following year, you know, you're then going to get that if you've reinvested that little £5 that you got from the dividend back in the stock market, then next year you're getting the 5% on 105. So this is the point, like, and this is what I really want to reach people on. Nobody's got abundant money. We've still got a cost of living pressure. So we've got to make the money that we are saving work really, really hard for us. And you know, making use of some of these quite simple tools. Start as early as you can. Let that compounding work. Get in the right asset class for you. You'd be really amazed how that accumulates. You know, as you say, £34,000 is above a median salary in the UK. That's a whole year's income that you haven't had to save because the market's done the work for you.
Karen, if you could sit tight for a couple of minutes, we will be coming back to you. But first, a quick break and then to our small business barometer supported by Monzo Business. Hello, welcome back to The Rest is Money with me, Steph McGovern.
And with me, Robert Peston.
Now, we're going to be talking to Karen Ward again in a couple of minutes. But first, it's time now for our small business barometer brought to you by Monzo Business. And this, of course, is our monthly look at the kind of challenges and opportunities facing SMEs, because let's not forget they employ together around 60% of the UK workforce. So what's happening with them matters, and we love talking about this. And this month, the focus we wanted to talk about, given how much is happening internationally and how we keep talking about all the global pressures on business, is about those small businesses who are selling abroad. It's 1 in 9 UK SMEs now sells internationally, and it's everything from fashion brands to vegan bakeries. So I think we're kind of looking at the micro exporter. So founders who think internationally from day one, even if they're only like shipping a couple of parcels abroad a week. It feels, Robert, that it is a lot easier to do that now because of all the different platforms out there for, but you know, particularly people in the arts and crafts and things like that, to be able to sell abroad from day one.
So there are the technological changes that definitely make it much more straightforward and easy for any business, big or small, to get into international sales. And we should talk about that in some depth. I think it is quite important to remind people that when we left the EU, quite a lot of businesses shut down, some of them, their international sales, because all of a sudden there was a whole load of bureaucracy and admin associated with selling into the European single market. And, there were a number of businesses that turned their back on selling abroad because, their main market was Europe's single market. Now, the good news is that, there are many, many platforms from sort of Shopify and Etsy are sort of examples of these, which make it relatively simple to sell abroad. It isn't utterly without risk, but you can massively reduce the risk. And not only you can reduce it, any ambitious business should be thinking about taking advantage of sales outside the UK. It's a sort of no-brainer. You want to expand. You want to be in the biggest market.
I have been helping my dad with this. So my dad's an artist and we've been using a platform recently to sell his art abroad. And it's really interesting, these sites now, which act as the middleman in these situations. And actually it's been really straightforward, because I was worried it'd end up with me practically with another full-time job. But it's been a case of uploading bits to an online user interface thing. They then work out pricing and stuff like that. They help you with all that based on what they see in the market. And then they will collect a piece of art from you and do all the postage and everything. So you can just sell something, online, someone buys it, you just package it up, someone comes and collects it and takes it abroad for you. Now, obviously they take a massive cut of the money, but it's been a way of helping my dad with the business side of things that he's often struggled with over the years.
I mean, one of the interesting, I think, challenges is, do you try and go for a strategy where you get as many customers as you possibly can? Or do you think about a strategy which says, actually, it's much better to sort of build a relationship with a sort of small number of customers?
So a friend of mine with a brownie business, he's grown it really quickly by doing this limited edition run. So everyone suddenly is like, oh, we better get them now before they run out. And so it can be used as a good marketing thing. And I know he does that, where he'll do a solid run of baking for a couple of days, sell the brownies all over, but do it as a limited batch so that he's not letting anyone down if the orders are too big and he can't fulfill them. Because that's key as well, is not letting customers down, because you can quite easily get a bad reputation if you overcommit and don't deliver.
I mean, the other thing which we should obviously point out, now that we're moving into this age of so-called agentic artificial intelligence, where essentially artificial intelligence can manage so much of the logistics that traditionally humans have had to do, there will be pretty soon AI services which will take almost all the hassle out of executing sales abroad. It'll fill in all your customs papers for you, for example. It's usually sensible to have a human just double check that all the forms have been filled out properly. But frankly, all the donkey work should be able to be done totally automatically.
Speaking of donkeys, did you know that if a donkey falls in a swimming pool, the best way to get it out is to fill the swimming pool with water, not empty it and lift them out? That's a fact I've learnt in the last week. Not the same for a cow or a horse.
Is this the small business you and I are creating? We're creating an international rescuing donkeys business. What a good idea.
There we go. Well, thank you once again to our business banking partners, Monzo Business, for supporting this part of the show. It's really important, as well as covering all the big global stuff. We talk about small businesses. You can join me and over 600,000 other businesses already banking with Monzo Business and sign up for an account today. Only sole traders or limited company directors in the UK can apply. T's and C's apply.
And now, back to our absolutely gripping chat with Karen Ward of JP Morgan Asset Management. The costs for all of us terms of the burden on the tax system of over-reliance on the pay-as-you-go state pension are set to become punitive.
Yeah, I mean, let's go into, and I want to, as we talk about the role of the state, so first of all, there are some pretty high expectations on the role of the state, and it's pension, it's healthcare, and then it's your elderly care, like should you need residential care. So those are the aspects when I think about the state's involvement. And there's particularly the two cohorts that I might have thought would be a little bit more conservative about how they thought the state might support them were the young, because we know our population is aging pretty rapidly, or above median earners. But actually, the survey showed that 40% of the young expect the state in all three aspects to be at least as generous as today. And half of median earners expect the state to be more or as generous as there are today. And I think this is the one part that really concerns me, and I suppose why I'm doing a bit of a public awareness campaign, because the government cannot do this. This is beyond politics. This is no critique of the government or Rachel Reeves or any chancellors that are going to come in the coming governments, because the older part of the population vote. And there's no incentive for any current government to say, oh, you 30-year-old, I'm not sure that you're going to get what your parent got. So just be mindful of that and start putting a little bit more today. That's absolutely no political incentive to do this whatsoever, because at the end of the day, politicians have to get elected. But that leaves us, therefore, with this sort of knowledge vacuum of the youngsters. We're just sort of stumbling through time without anyone being equipped or really made aware of the fact that our population is aging pretty rapidly. Already today, there are 45% more retirees and only 19% more working people than there were at the start of the century. And those numbers get bad pretty quickly in the next few decades.
So 90% more people in work than in 2000, but 45% more people retired. So a smaller number of people in work supporting the retired population.
Exactly. Our dependency ratio, the number of older people, is growing really rapidly. And no chancellor, no matter how good they are, can make those numbers add up on current policy.
In your research, there's a couple of really stark numbers in terms of what that means for the viability of the British state. So just share those with us. So, and this is to do with on some, perfectly reasonable assumptions, what happens to the national debt over, let's say, a 50-year period.
On current expectations, and this comes from the Office for Budget Responsibility, over the next 50 years, we're going from a level of debt to GDP, which is around 100% today, but then that reaches about 275% in the next 50 years. Now, that probably can't happen. So this is the whole point about if it's going to be required over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, some change in how that money is allocated, I think it's right that people are aware of that today.
You've got an even scarier number based on if productivity doesn't improve and we don't invest in the way that we should, what then happens to the ratio of national debt to our national income?
Yeah, it's a pretty scary number. So it's 650% of GDP.
Which, to be frank,
debt.
We're bust at that point.
Yeah.
That's not a realistic future for us.
No. And exactly as you say, Robert, so this is why getting this sorted today, every actor involved, government, regulators, everyone in my industry, getting it sorted today so that people are saving well, that money is reaching British businesses, those British businesses are investing, that then equips their staff with more staff, everybody's more productive, that then keeps us in the best scenario where actually, debt's still rising. It's still not to say that difficult decisions won't be made, but the situation is less grave. So we've got to fix all this today, but we've also got to be mindful that even in that best case scenario where productivity is recovering, we still are probably going to have, 40, 50 years' time, those challenges about rationing exactly what the state can provide to the older population. And, the analogy here is dentistry. I got straight teeth on the NHS. I mean, remarkable now, it's
a fortune.
That's a thing of the past, right? And I think we're just reminding that, and I think that's important because often when I have this conversation, certainly I've had it within my own family, and they say, well, of course I'll get it because I've paid for it and I'm entitled to it. And I say, well, no, but the money that you paid in during your tax system, that wasn't stored in a pot for you. We're in a pay-as-you-go system. So just again, just try as much as you can to think about, can I possibly do everything I can today to set myself up? Just have a little bit of a question over how much the state is going to provide the full, comfort of retirement that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening, isn't it? Everything we've been talking about and those statistics you've found. So thank you so much, Karen, for that.
Absolute pleasure.
Lovely to see you as always. And that's it from us on The Rest is Money. Goodbye.
Yeah, bye-bye.